Yuuki Kagurazaka was a genius. In his original world, he already possessed a special power. Mental force, so-called psychokinesis, a superpower, one that he was born with. However, he never intended to make use of this power, because he knew that if others were to discover his power, he would become a spectacle. Despite the monotony of daily life, he seemed to enjoy himself. He had loving parents and plenty of friends. Making money was easy for him. As long as he wanted it, there was nothing he couldn't get. There was nothing he wasn't satisfied with. Yet, one fateful day, tragedy struck. Just as he started middle school, both of Yuki's parents died in a car accident. It was not his parents' fault. The Kagurazaka's car was struck by a truck driver who was dozing off behind the wheel. Only Yuuki, who was sleeping in the backseat, survived. Yuuki found it incredibly unfair. He hated the guilty driver but could not do anything about it. Japan was a nation of law and order, and taking personal revenge was illegal. When the verdict of the trial came, he realized various things. He realized the incompetence of the transport company, given that they contracted the work under unreasonable conditions. They put all the pressure on their employed field workers, and these workers had to keep working despite being overworked. The driver was a victim in a sense, too. Then the fault would fall on the transport company, but that was not true, either. If they were to decline the requests from their important clients, they wouldn't order from them in the future. One doesn't simply turn down an old client's requests. In that case, they would need to improve the management of their business, but it wasn't easy hiring experienced drivers, either. Even if the company wanted to hire young talent and train them, their circumstances right now would not allow them to spare the effort. What is this? Yuuki couldn't help but exclaim. There were so many unfair things in this world, yet his hands were bound. Who should he hate? At the end of the day, the fault lay with the flawed societal structure. He yearned to take his revenge against this society. But there was nothing Yuuki could do. He was a genius, but quickly realized his limit. This world was already highly developed. Even with his superpower, it was not enough to make an impact. He had no chance of winning against an army. And even if he could, there was no future for him if he did. Yuuki also thought about destroying society and rebuilding it from the ground up. But that would plunge many into misfortune. He couldn't do such a thing. If he really wanted to change society as a whole, he would have to do it step by step, slowly increasing the number of like-minded companions. Only when he became a politician would he be able to shape this country into his image. This was the only solution within his reach. But walking this path would require patience. It was a feasible goal, were he to work assiduously, but that would still take a matter of decades. Yuuki was torn. But before he could come to a conclusion, he found himself in the other world. Was this a blessing or a curse? Yuuki was summoned by the demon Lord Kazalum and his deep-seated resentment. He had lost his physical body and became purely spiritual instead. But he never lost his power as the Curse Lord. He spent a long time preparing for his resurrection. In order to see this to fruition, he resorted to summoning a body that was compatible with his spiritual body. Naturally, he needed to make sure that the being he summoned was carefully restrained. No misstep was allowed in this ritual, so as a precaution, he used his domination power to engrave a curse before summoning. First, he would crush the mind of the one he wanted to summon, before the target even knew what hit it. Next, Kazalum would deprive his soul's power and take its body to resurrect himself. That was the gist of his plan. There was only one thing Kazalum hadn't accounted for: the person he summoned being Yuuki. The curse proved ineffective. With his genius, Yuuki already grasped the rules of this world. When he crossed worlds, he acquired the power he so wanted, the power to change the world. It was soul power, a pure form of energy that could freely adapt its nature. Its name was Unique Skill Creator. When he told Rimura that he didn't have any special ability, he lied as naturally as he breathed. His first act of creation, using his skill, was to create the ability that would nullify evil intentions against himself. Anti-skill. At that moment, Kazalum's scheme was ruined. He even lost to Yuuki, becoming his servant in the process. Yuuki, on the other hand, discovered his raison d'etre in this world. This was a world where the strong trampled the weak. It was built on an imperfect system that still had a long way to go until it was fully developed. And so, Yuuki thought that if he could become the ruler of this world, then he could lead this world in the right direction. Yuuki was determined to challenge this unjust world head-on. His next step was to wage war against this world itself. Conquering the world, Yuuki began moving towards his goal. Yuuki, accompanied by Laplace, Footman, and Tyr, escaped from the chaos they unleashed at the church. Their first priority was to escape from the Holy Empire of Lobilius. While it was tempting to hang around a little longer to watch the chaos unfold, it wasn't worth the risk. The Berserk hero Chrono wasn't a force to be taken lightly, and she certainly was not someone Yuuki could control. She was lashing out indiscriminately. Everyone there was her enemy. She was a truly terrifying force. Granville must have known this when he asked to cooperate with Yuuki. It was a tough pill for him to swallow, but Yuuki had to admit that he'd simply been outsmarted this time. Ain't we the biggest losers here, Lapis complained. All that work distracting Demon Lord Luminous to get an opening, and we were this close to getting the ultimate weapon, the hero. Ha ho ho, Footman chuckled. That one's on a whole other level. It's a shame we let it go, but everyone who took that thing on has gotta be dead by now. Footman had a point, but Yuuki was far from convinced about the latter. The hero couldn't possibly have dispatched everyone there that easily, he thought. We can't guarantee that, though, Lapis remarked. No matter how you put it, Demon Lord Rimuru is stupidly powerful. Plus, Luminous and Leon were there too. With 3 Demon Lords and several powerful magians, both sides had equal chances of winning. You have a point. Granbell is an ex-hero, so he's also pretty strong. I wouldn't bet on who won out in the end, their tier added. Those two were not as optimistic as Footman. Like Yuuki, they thought that Rimuru and his entourage had a chance of winning against Chrono. To Yuuki, Chrono winning would be the best possible outcome. If that were the case, not only could he get rid of the nuisance Rimuru and the hindering Granbell, but also the future threats, namely Luminous and Leon, whom the clowns despised. All these threats would disappear, and it would essentially put control over the entire West in Yuuki's hands. The only remaining wild card would be Chrono, which would be tough to deal with. But considering that she lacked self-consciousness, there was nothing to fear. By using a couple monsters as bait, they'd be able to lure her off to some far corner of the desert anyway. Raw strength alone wasn't enough to pose a threat in Yuuki's eyes. That's why he wanted to stay behind and watch the battle play out. Actually, running away is the right choice. If we got caught in the crossfire, we'd be taking a lot of hits. Besides, I had an ominous feeling Yuuki's instinct kicked in. In order to make plans for the future, he needed to analyze this chaotic fight. Even though he wanted to stay, Yuuki chose to trust his instinct and fled alongside the troop. If Chrono were defeated, the surviving Demon Lords would surely consider them a thorn in their side. Rimuru seemed to have already noticed Yuuki's betrayal. He wouldn't be able to make excuses anymore. The territories and reputation he built in the West would go to waste due to this blunder. He only had himself to blame for having fallen into Granbell's trap. He was merely reaping what he'd sown. This was why he chose to flee as soon as possible. He could no longer hesitate. One of Yuuki's strengths was that he was decisive. He had made it through countless challenges with his judgment. This time is the same, Yuuki thought to himself. But not a moment too soon, his naive plan hit a brick wall. It happened in an instant. As Yuuki and his entourage were about to escape, a man suddenly stood in front of them. Beside him was an eye-catching blue-haired beauty, wearing a rather out-of-place crimson-made uniform. Huh. Who are you? Yuuki stopped, sensing danger. The man didn't respond to Lapis's question. He was staring straight at Yuuki, ignoring everyone else. Ha ho ho, if you insist on getting in our way. Footman, who was standing in front, went to attack the man and woman. Instead, a figure suddenly appeared and pinned Footman to the ground with one hand. It was another woman, wearing the same crimson-made uniform as the blue-haired one. This one, though, had green hair. Needless to say, it was Misery, who had been busy sabotaging the kingdom of Ingratia until just a few hours ago. Due to Tensura's interference, she had to stop her meddling, and quickly came here thereafter. Since Misery had come, it obviously followed that the blue-haired beauty was Rain. Both of them were accompanying the one and only Demon Lord, Geek Crimson. Known as the Lord of Darkness, he was the strongest of the Demon Lords. His crimson hair, a red sheen deeper than blood, fluttered in the wind. His crimson eyes, glimmering gold and silver stars, gazed down at Yuuki arrogantly. Yo. I think this is the first time we've met. You've done well to catch my attention. Gee's gaze was locked on Yuuki. No one else was worthy of his eyes. That fact wasn't lost on Yuuki, but he was conflicted over how that made him feel. When Footman was easily beaten by Misery, he could measure just how strong they were. Or rather, he could tell by the color of their hair and by those special-made suits. Kaguli, also known as Kazalam and Claiming, had mentioned these people. These three fit the bill. In other words, the person in front of him stood at the top of the world. His position was Yuuki's end goal. As long as his ambition was to conquer the world, he would have to clash with this enemy one day. Is that so? You must be the so-called strongest demon lord, Geek Crimson. It's an honor to meet you. My name is Yuuki Kagurazaka. I never expected you to come to me. Were you looking to team up? Yuuki mustered a smile without being intimidated by Gi. Naturally, that was just wishful thinking. He could tell just by looking at how Misery was handling Footman right now. It was plain as day that Gi and his maids did not come to forge any alliances. Even though he was faced with overwhelming danger, Yuuki still tried to put on a friendly tone. This was his unique way of negotiating. He would often throw out a wild statement to get a reaction, in an attempt to gauge his enemy's intentions. Ahaha. You're an interesting fellow. You've got plenty of guts to be saying that straight to my face. Now that's not a bad proposition, but you seem to be Leon's enemy. Besides, weren't you planning to head east? I personally don't want Rudra to accrue any more power. Negotiations failed. Yuuki knew from the start that Guy would not have accepted the ludicrous proposal. But he didn't let that discourage him, instead reading deeper into Guy's words. Rudra was the name of the emperor of the Eastern Empire, the Naskanamria Momaria United Eastern Empire. He figured those two had some kind of relationship, one evidently tainted by bad blood. So is he trying to get rid of us before we can run to the east? I don't really want to make the strongest demon lord my enemy, but I suppose there's no other way out, considering how things have developed. He wouldn't be able to avoid conflict with Guy. They had no chance of escaping unscathed. Under these circumstances, he couldn't resort to trickery, either. With all other options blacked out, his best bet was going all out against Guy. Yuuki finally came to a conclusion. Never mind, then. Since we're enemies, this timing is impeccable. Before I move my base to the east, I can see just how strong the strongest demon lord is for myself. Yuuki answered, practically taunting Guy. An overwhelming sense of excitement welled from his heart. He had been hiding his full strength all this time, but he had to let loose against the strongest of the demon lords, if he wanted even an inkling of a chance. The thought of failure never crossed his mind as he stepped forward.